Let's start off with news on the local front. We've got MTN going after Orascom. Who is Orascom?
Orascom, well, so it seems, the reports are not completely clear, although Orascom's shares in London were halted for trade, and MTN put out that same cautionary at about the same time, so people are thinking this is the two. And it seems it's the African assets, because Orascom also have operations in Pakistan and Bangladesh, which look to be high growth assets. But I think the problem Orascom came across is they, like Zain, got into too much debt. They've straddled with, I think it's about $5.2 billion worth of debt. About 90-odd million subscribers, and that includes Pakistan and Bangladesh. But I think their assets that are key for MTN are assets in North Africa, and even in Zimbabwe and Namibia, even those are pretty small operations. So it seems to have come about, this uncertainty inside of the Orascom group, believe it or not, due to a football match in terms of the qualifying for Algeria and Egypt, where, as you know, Algeria qualified ahead of Egypt. And now it seems there's some, there's some key taxation that the Algerians want to put on Orascom. Of course, Orascom, on next door, is an Egyptian company, so it's not quite clear why Orascom would be selling these key African assets, but it does more likely seem to me that there's too much debt in there, and perhaps they want to reduce that. And plus, they've had a rights issue last year in order to be able to contain that for the time being.
Talking about too much debt, I mean, MTN's share price fell a little on Friday. Investors are concerned that it may have to pay a whole lot for Orascom.
Yeah, I think they're probably in a good position. And the reason why I say that is because Orascom do have more debt to equity than MTN do. So it might be a part shares, part cash deal, although I have heard in the market that MTN has managed to raise a significant amount of money. What the price tag will be is anyone's guess, because of course it's only the African operations, or seemingly. So it's being able to get a foothold in North Africa, where they've wanted to for quite some time. And there's some pretty lucrative markets there, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia. These are pretty key markets, and it would give them quite a nice footprint in Africa. I mean, yesterday I had breakfast with a school friend of mine who works for Supersport, and he travels Africa extensively, and he's saying, kind of as a brand, MTN and football work quite nicely together. So it is pretty much, for me, MTN wanting to sew up coverage across the whole continent. Of course, East Africa remains one of those territories where they're desperate to get into. So I guess we'll have to watch the space.
There's going to be lots of competition there, with Bharti Airtel which just bought Zain. So MTN going head to head with Bharti Airtel.
Yeah, but you must remember those Zain assets that Bharti bought, for me, are second-tier assets. They're second and third licenses in their place, so they're going to have to take some time to bed those down to become real competitors for them. I mean, obviously, a foothold in East Africa is key, again, for Bharti, and they managed to do that ahead of MTN. So I don't know. I think if this deal should happen, obviously the price they have to pay is key, and shareholders therefore have to approve it. They first have to announce the terms before anyone even starts thinking about it. And we've seen several deals fail, not over the last 18 months or so, with MTN specifically. So I don't know. As a shareholder of MTN, I'd like to see the specifics first before making any comment on whether I think it's good or bad or indifferent. But as trying to get complete coverage of the continent, I would go with that. I'd say that's a good idea.
Tomorrow we've got a public holiday, but what can we
Another one.
Yeah. Yay. What can we look out for this week on the local front?
On the local front, I think again we're going to be driven by US earnings, another big week. And today there are a few kind of benchmarkers in terms of the US economy. I think there's Caterpillar, I think there's UPS as well. So those are two big companies that give you a state of the nation. And that, remember again, the US consumer is key to global recovery, because it's not just about the emerging tigers out east. The US economy still plays a massive part in terms of the global economy. And although that's become diminished over the last decade or so, just because of the emergence of the BRIC-type countries, it still is, at this point, it's pretty key, bearing in mind that the Eurozone seem to be having some serious problems of their own.
Yeah, we talk about Greece finally asking for that, activating that 45 billion euro loan. Is that positive for Greece going forward?
Well, I don't know. It's just, you know, delaying the inevitable, isn't it? I mean, you're going to have to pay that back at some stage. So, yeah, I think they're going to have to put in more austerity measures. You know, just make sure that they capture the wider network of taxpayers who are not in the system, you know, who are jigging the system. You know, and typically what you've seen is when they announce these measures, they're big protests on the street. But what is the, you know, I'm not quite sure what the alternative is. Is the alternative defaulting? And they're not going to be allowed to default, having been inside the Eurozone. So maybe the noise will get stronger from the likes of Germany. Remember, they've got an election coming up very shortly, inside the next 3 to 4 weeks, I think, from the opposition to say, oh no, let's boot Greece out of the Eurozone. You know, I don't think, you know, I know Jean-Claude Trichet has said that's never going to happen, but, you know, what do they say? Never say never.